Hello and welcome to the first ever live podcast recording of The Midpoint. This episode is sponsored by Sweaty Betty, and as you can hear, they've invited a fabulous studio audience to be with me today. They've also lined up a panel of brilliant women, and we're going to be chatting about movement and exercise through all the different stages of our lives. Lenice Brothers is a yoga teacher and registered nutritionist specialising in women's health, hormones, and the menstrual cycle. She set up her private nutrition practice, Eat, Love, Move. She's also hosted a Period Story podcast and is the author of You Can Have a Better Period. Hi, Lenice.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Amazing to have you here with all that expertise. The other thing about you, Lenice, which I really love, because the Midpoint focuses on changes that happen in midlife, you didn't start out in that area. You did something very different, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a long career in advertising, so this is quite a shift to teach yoga at Frame, to do nutrition, to specialize in hormone health, and my LinkedIn is quite an interesting experience now.
Well, we're glad you're specialising in this area and you're with us today. We also have Dr. Helen O'Neill, who is CEO and founder of Hertility, an award-winning women's health company shaping the future of reproductive healthcare. She's also a lecturer in reproductive and molecular genetics at University College London and has spent the last 15 years researching genetics, fertility and women's health. So she's a bit lazy. Welcome, Helen. And also, everybody in the room can see this, but those listening might not. I don't know whether your voice has changed, but she's very heavily pregnant as well, which is just kind of adding in. I think it's brilliant.
It's so on
to
brand.
bring that prop with you today.
Yeah, exactly.
You're on message, testing out the FemTech products.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I won't leak for you. I hope.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And then completing our panel, I'm delighted to welcome Michelle Griffith Robinson, a former Olympian who represented Great Britain as a triple jumper for over 15 years, became the first woman. Yeah. She became the first woman to jump over 14 metres in the whole of the Commonwealth. And outside of elite sport, she's established herself as a successful businesswoman and personal trainer, motivational speaker, and she's the mother of 3 amazing kids as well. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Gabby. Hi, panellists. Hi.
It's great to finally get you on the Midpoint. And obviously, you know, you can just see by looking at you, you're still very much somebody who loves her sport, loves her movement, and know the power of that. And that's kind of where I want to start. Actually, I'm going to start with you, Michelle, on this, because we all here, I think, in various ways, know the joy of movement, understand the power of movement. And I want to find out which are the areas of exercise that gives you the most joy, you 3 of you. So we'll start with you, Michelle.
I think for me, it's when I retired from athletics 18 years ago now, so many years ago, I had to find something that I really enjoyed doing. And I realised that through all the long distance running, that wasn't my thing, that wasn't my gig. But I loved weight training. And so I'd probably say that weight training is probably my specific go-to training. I'll add in an odd 5K here and there because of peer pressure, but not really. But I love weight training. I love how it makes me feel, the strength it gives me. And actually, it's proven that over 35, women need to be weight training. So for all of us, those listeners out there, get weight training, get it involved at some weight. Start with your body weight and then increase. So for me, my number one would be, start with your weight training.
Because sarcopenia is a big thing.
Huge.
At the age of 35, obviously. And keeping those muscles, not just from the point of view of the aesthetic reason, obviously, it's so important for us structurally.
Structurally, unfortunately, 7 weeks ago, I had a very bad fall walking into a hotel. And had I not been, quite sturdy, I could have been a lot more injured than I am now. And that goes to show you, and if that's me who's 52 and falling like that, when you're 62, 72, these are the things that you need to start almost future-proofing and bulletproofing your body from now. Don't just wait until it's too late. So that's why I'm a big advocate. And all my clients, I'm like, listen, get those baked bean tins out, do what you need to do, grab those small weights, get squatting, really use your body weight. And I think that's a positive thing. It's our bodies. Use them.
Yeah. At this stage in your pregnancy, I imagine that
I am weight training every day. I carry this weight on my bladder for the most part.
Have you been able to keep exercising throughout the pregnancy?
When you say keep exercising, it makes the assumption that I was exercising before. I've been building up my weight training by every trimester.
Are you a walker?
Yeah, I run between meetings. I run when I'm late. But yeah, I'm never reminded that I need to keep moving.
Well, you look very, very healthy indeed. It looks like it's been a good pregnancy. So let's hope it carries on for at least a few more hours. So that we're not delivering the first baby on the midpoint.
That would be good.
Lenice, you are a teacher of movement. You're a yoga teacher. Was it always yoga for you?
I used to be a runner, so I've done marathons, half marathons, but I always started to feel like punishment. And something I talk a lot about in my classes, in my nutrition work, is pleasure and enjoyment. And you want to move your body in ways that feel good. And when you do a really tough workout and you feel tired afterwards and you feel upset and angry, that's not what you want. Yeah. You want to feel that kind of like you've done something really powerful for yourself. And that's the kind of thing that I really kind of imbue in all my classes, the pleasure of movement. Because I think we only get one body. So, find gratitude in what your body does for you.
So yoga right now is the thing that you're feeling the most satisfaction.
And kettlebells as well.
Right.
Yeah, I'm obsessed.
Has it changed for you as you've got older? I mean, you've mentioned already, Lenice, that from running to yoga was a big shift. Helen, have you noticed yourself enjoying anything? Any exercise?
I feel like life is a marathon these days. I'm like the least fit person here. No, I feel like I have much more of an appreciation of my body and what it's given to me by being able to create a life and grow a baby. And in a strange way, I think that actually recovered my body from previous injuries that I had. I broke my back in a car accident years and years ago, and I really suffered. And it was strange because I had 2 injuries. And when I had my first child, my hips widened and I really didn't feel the same sciatica as I did before. And my upper back, every day when you're lifting a child, I honestly felt like she cured me. And it was such a strange thing to think nothing will keep you going like a child, and nothing will keep you motivated and moving like running after a child. So actually I feel like in a weird way, we sometimes berate motherhood, but actually it's what really rescued me from, actually the grind of sitting, working all the time, having to go from one thing to the next, but actually getting on the floor with a human being, picking up a human being as they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that we underestimate the movement that mums make inadvertently.
Even the idea of kind of crawling around on the floor.
Yes, movement.
Very rarely do without a child involved. Depending on your pastime. Michelle, did you dabble in anything else? Because obviously I imagine that being a triple jumper, there are a lot of weights, a lot of plyometrics go on in that training. Did you, when you finished doing it competitive, did you think, right, that's it, I'm going to do something completely different?
Yeah, actually I did, and my kids and my husband laughed at me. I did kickboxing. And I've got a little bit of aggression in me. A little bit. Got 3 older brothers, so I'm the youngest and the only girl, so I had to always fight for my voice to be heard. So I went into kickboxing and I was pretty good at it. And I was in a competition, and a girl unfortunately punched me in my face, and I won the fight, needless to say. I went into kickboxing seriously that day. My legs reached places that I didn't know they could reach. So yes, I did go into kickboxing. I really enjoyed that. And actually, the thing that I've done, Pilates as well. So, Lenice talks about yoga. I've done a little bit of yoga. Not really for me just yet. I'm not saying it's a bit quiet for me. Okay. But I do love
come to my
Pilates.
Class.
I'll come. I might regret that one. That's a threat in itself. Come to my class.
I'm a massive advocate and fan of Pilates. I think if you're doing Pilates well,
Pilates on the reformer.
Right class,
my God.
Both mat and reformer, you can really push yourself in ways that you're thinking, how is this tiny movement hurting?
I know so much.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It's very empowering as well, I think, because it really does give you such huge strength in your core and your back as well. Do you think that through the years your kind of self-image, the way you think about your body has changed a lot along those kind of sporting and movement journeys?
Absolutely. I think that idea of gratitude is really powerful for me. I think I'm more appreciative of what my body does for me now that I I'm mid, as you say, 38. I'm 44, so I'm smack like in the midpoint,
There's lots
which
of-
is
oh,
weird
she
for
looks
me to
well.
admit. It.
She looks great.
But there's gratitude that I can still run around with my son. He's 10. He's really into football, cricket, and like run in the park with him and do everything I need to do. And last night I was lifting a sofa up the stairs with my husband, and having the strength to do that, I think is really powerful for me.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons I keep weight training, because I know it's good, but also I want to move my own furniture.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've kind of indicated that sport and movement hasn't necessarily been top priority in your life, but I imagine through one pregnancy already and well into another one, that how you feel about your body has changed over the
I
years.
can't tell you the difference in how I feel about my body pre and post baby. Everyone advertises this, that we all lose ourselves. And I remember feeling quite intimidated when I was pregnant with my first, because women will be quite cutting. They'll say goodbye to your sleep, goodbye to your sex life, goodbye to your tits, goodbye to your ass. And you're like, oh, God, this sounds horrific. And in fact, it woke me up to the fact that my breasts could feed a human being. My uterus grew a human being. I do not look at myself in any way in a negative light anymore. I'm actually entirely grateful for everything. And something I learned recently was that actually when you hit puberty, that is when your body starts building up fat, visceral fat, all around your thighs and your bum, and it's basically building up all of your omegas to store for breastfeeding, because you will never have enough in your diet. So you start building this up from your teenage years, and that is supposed to get you through 12 months of pregnancy and then feeding your child. And all I could think was, I can't believe I really tried to get rid of my omegas for so long. Those were there to serve my ass was there to build a human being. And now I'm like, we should respect that and not try to get rid of it. If we knew its function from an evolutionary perspective, we would be like, I'm paying homage.
Amazing. Yeah. I know that. Why have I never heard that?
Yeah. I know.
Where have we been, Gabby?
Something about them not, bothering to look at women for a very long time. Probably ever.
We're catching up. We're catching up. And that's what this is all about. I think generally on exercise, Michelle, I think a lot of people have come on the midpoint and said that if exercise was a pill, everybody would take it in terms of, I don't just mean because they don't have to exercise. I mean because of the mental health and positivity benefits that you get from exercise. And we know scientifically that's to do with the release of endorphins and hormones. And I think that's, for me, the thing that I always try and I'm very lucky. I was a gymnast internationally as a kid, and I've trained and enjoyed it all my life. But you try and sell exercise to people who aren't sure. So I'd like you to do that now. I'd like
right.
To
okay. So I'm going to sell it to them. I think that the biggest thing I'd say is use it or lose it, and that is walking. Just even if that's your thing, get out walking, get moving. Movement is life. What it gives you back, you can't. It's almost like you're banking this time, because there'll come a point where we will all be struggling to get up those stairs. So it's about banking that, And I would say you don't have to. I'm not asking anybody to be an Olympian, to be an elite athlete or be a yoga teacher. I'm not asking or to be a doctor of Hertility. But what I am asking them to do is to invest in themselves by putting in little bits of exercise a couple of times a week, 2 or 3 times a week, looking after yourself so that in the future you can draw on that. It's like putting money in the bank, not getting much interest, but later on you'll be able to draw it back out. And that's why, I am selling it to them. Get out there, move your bodies, because there'll be one time when you can't.
Yeah. And I think, having said that, there are times for all of us, I think, where exercise was perhaps not as easy to do. And it might be a physical thing. You might have had an injury, but motivation sometimes can be lacking. Have you had that, Denise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to have really, really terrible periods, and I knew that exercise was a way to help me feel better. But when you're in a lot of pain, it's difficult to move. And that's where you kind of either say, actually, you know what, the best thing for me is to rest, because, there's exercise, but then there's also being really intentional about it and saying, actually, today should be a rest day for me. And we do get a lot of benefit from that as well. So being able to identify those points where is this healthy motivation that I need, or is this a motivation to do something different? That's been a really important delineation to make.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about training within the menstrual cycle what we're learning over the last decade or so is just extraordinary, isn't it? I bet you wish back in the day that
Oh my
you had that
gosh.
knowledge as a professional athlete.
I'm saying it, a couple of years ago, I think Dina Asher Smith pulled up with some cramp, and it turned out and transpired that it was because of her menstrual cycle. I was like, guys, back in the day, you'd be like, yeah, just put in that tampon and get on with it, yeah? There was no reference to anything. You would have to just get on with it. And the science that's out there now, which has obviously clearly been there for a while, but again, because women's health were kind of put on the back burner, we're only hearing about it 18 years after I retired. Maybe I would have jumped 15 metres instead of 14, maybe.
But if we focus on the motivation,
Yeah.
People that aren't as highly motivated as you to move,
Yeah.
have you had periods of your life where, not period,
Periods.
menstrual period, but moments where you've been like, I'm just in a bit of a fog, I just can't get myself going?
Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, is up to 2 years ago, before I was on, and I'm very proud to say I'm taking HRT. It works for me, and I'm not here to sell it on the midpoint, but I'm here to say that's what works for me. There was times where I was like, my joints are hurting me. I can't be bothered. I'm too tired. I can just about get through the day. So actually, that's where you think, oh my gosh, even people say, just get to the gym, just do something. And I'm like, this is me, who's a personal trainer, a life coach, an Olympian. I've got a great mindset. It was tough. So what I would do is be kind to myself. And I think Lenice has really emphasised the fact of showing gratitude. Give yourself some grace and some space, but not for too long. So I think that's how I would say to people, if until you're in the right headspace, be gentle with yourself. Try the yoga class, but the best thing you can do is get out and walk and talk to people. Get out in nature, and even that's a 20-minute walk, that's better than doing nothing. Something is better than nothing.
Yeah. Let's talk then about cycles and what we're learning about women's menstrual cycles and exercise, because sometimes it's been a while since I've had one, but I I remember times feeling like I've got stomach cramps, I don't feel great, I can't be bothered really, because this is the last thing I really want to do. But then if I did some exercise, quite often it helped alleviate those symptoms. There's a balancing act to be had, Helen.
Yeah, I think we underestimate just how different the different stages of our menstrual cycle are. And the example I'll always give is to say we recognize the difference between night and day, because the sky is a different color and we feel tired. And I think recognizing the difference in our hormone levels throughout the menstrual cycle is like acknowledging night and day in terms of our capabilities. And the example I always give is to say, if you were to tell someone to do a big task in the middle of the night, they would give themselves allowances. They would say, okay, I can do that, but just a disclaimer, it's the middle of the night for me. I won't be at my best. I might need to preserve. I might need to sleep better the night before. I might need some coffee and resources. And yet we expect women to continue out throughout their menstrual cycle as if every single day is the same. And yet the difference between our estrogen levels, our progesterone levels are more than the difference between night and day in terms of our melatonin and all of these different other hormones that we acknowledge that will make a big impact on our lives. And I think if we were to give ourselves the grace to say, we do at Hertility, we almost introduce ourselves by our cycle. We'll say, sorry, I'm really luteal today. And we'll invariably get, I am full follicular, I've got you. So I think it's actually really helpful. In fact, all of the rooms that we have, at Hertility, we have named. We've got the womb room, the fallopian foyer, the cervix suite. We've got, what else have we got? Oh, the labia lounge. We've also got a cafe, but it's only if you're
We've never had a beat on this show before, but, there's a first for everything.
good.
Love it.
So what we're learning is that when certain hormones are higher than others, we're going to find our strength changes as well. So it's not just feeling, well, that's why I'm a bit tired now.
Yeah.
That's why. But actually, there are times when it's optimal to train.
Absolutely. I think when we look even at estrogen alone and the fact that estrogen is linked, we so often think of it as being something that's just to do with reproduction or femininity. And we simplify this very powerful chemical messenger. And we think of it as being an isolated element that's produced by our ovaries. And yes, it is, but estrogen plays a role in our bone density, in our neurocognitive health, in our vasculature. And that's why when you think about all of the consequences of a lack of estrogen, you get vasomotor events where your veins literally can't dilate in the same way and respond to heat cold, so you get a hot flush. And I think even if we were to start to describe these events more clinically, rather than just trivializing them with brain fog, hot flush, like you're having a moment. If I think honestly, if men had those, they would be calling them severe vasomotor events. And everyone would listen and go, he's having a vasomotor event, rather than she's having a hot flush or she's got brain fog. It really undermines the clinical importance of what's happening to you physiologically when you're without that hormone. And yes, it's on a grander scale when you're going through perimenopause and you see these extreme dips. But throughout every single month, we do witness huge changes within even just that one hormone, which means that we are less focused or more focused depending on how much or how little of it we have.
So what have you noticed in your research about what movement can do to
we
change?
notice differences in your motivation to move, in your recovery, in depending on the time that you are moving, you will have different amounts of damage, recovery, repair, motivation, energy, all of these different factors which are so critical to underpin movement and purposeful movement. That's why I think when we first introduced ourselves to Sweaty Betty, I was so for saying movement through your menstrual cycles. In your follicular phase, it's active, where in your luteal phase, it's more restorative. And I think that's something all of us should recognize, both in our day-to-day movements and recovery, but also in our work life.
Because the science and the research is, in my kind of other job as a sports presenter, we're hearing more and more about it with regard to injuries. At certain times of the month, women are picking up, I say picking up, really serious injuries they're succumbing to, especially knee and ligament injuries. And that's really important, obviously, for the progression of women's sport. But actually, this is where it's great that this research is reaching us on a kind of a less competitive level, if you like, and that can affect our everyday lives. How about nutrition kind of hacking into hormones within the cycle?
Yeah, I think nutrition, we almost discount it in a way. We think, oh, well, I'm eating breakfast, lunch, or dinner. But I think if you think about it a little bit differently and you think, well, I'm eating 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, that's 21 different opportunities every week to add in foods that are beneficial for my hormone health, for supporting different aspects of the menstrual cycle, and especially if you have different conditions like fibroids, endometriosis, adenomyosis. And I don't love the term hacking hormones because it feels very male, but nutrition can be so supportive for supporting our hormones. If we think about hormones like estrogen and progesterone, they're fat based. So you think about the 80s and the 90s when it was all about low fat this, low fat that. We were missing an opportunity to add in fats that basically provide the scaffolding for the way that we make estrogen and progesterone and testosterone as well, which is an extremely important hormone for women. So thinking about the foods that you eat, adding in those healthy fats, adding in the protein. We hear about protein so much in talking about perimenopause and menopause, but truly it's so important for not only supporting your hormones, but supporting your energy and the way you feel, and really taking that very additive approach every meal, thinking about how can I add in more greens? How can I add in a bit more protein? What's the fat situation? Have I got enough greens? And I go back to what I said earlier about it's not about punishment. It's about making this feel really positive.
Punishment, it's nourishment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just came up with that, Michelle.
It's a good one, babe. You can signpost that one, babe.
You obviously, as an athlete, are very aware of what you're putting in your body because it's your fuel to get yourself onto the starting blocks or the start of an Olympian, and and that whole kind of purpose of eating, the purposefulness, the mindfulness of eating as an athlete is very different to us lay people. Did you kind of change that mindset, when you stopped competing, or have
Yeah,
you managed to
yeah.
retain the focus?
Yeah,
Do you have KFCs?
yeah, man, love it. Love it. Do you think that sponsor me?
An unlikely sponsor for the midpoint.
Sorry.
It has to be said.
Sorry, guys. So yeah, look, I'm moderate with everything I do, especially now. I'm 52 years old. I'm not punishing myself for anything, but I don't overindulge in anything. I hardly drink any alcohol, odd glass here or there. So that's something that I've chosen not to do because I don't really enjoy it. So that's fine. I do like high protein. I love salads. I love all of that. I'll have a pizza odd here and there. But actually, on a day-to-day basis, I enjoy my food. I sit down and I enjoy my food. You're not calorie counting, nothing. Move. I don't want to do none of that. Them days are done. I get everything together. And, one of Sweaty Betty's things that they always talk about is movement for everybody, fitness for everybody. And that's me. Everyone's an individual. One size doesn't fit all. And that's what works for me might not work for somebody else out there. But explore your options. Explore your options. What works for you?
What made you, Lenise, want to look at how you are our resident menstrual cycle expert, made you investigate this part of women's health?
So when I first got my period, it was incredibly painful, very heavy, and I have what I know now is mild endometriosis. And the options at the time were grin and bear it, or go on the pill, or take really strong painkillers. And I know those are still the options now. I'm looking at some of the people in the audience nodding. But I started to explore different aspects of health and nutrition, and I still feel that we get all these messages that as women that we're supposed to grin and bear it, that periods are supposed to be painful, we're supposed to feel bad right before a period. PMS is inevitable, and it's very disempowering as women, and it takes up so much space in our mind, this burden of pain, when really it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm not discounting pain that we experience it, but I'm saying that it's not inevitable. And I think it's really powerful, that message, and that's one of the reasons I got into this work.
And why did you, Helen, specifically start to focus in this area when you were a young scientist in women's health?
To me, I just found it fascinating. I did genetics, and then I did prenatal genetics and fetal medicine. And that really was a catalyst to say, how is it that two cells can fuse and form a human life and everything thereafter, and how incredibly powerful we are as women to be able to carry this cell that grows into hundreds of cells. And I think that I evolved in my fascination with understanding different aspects of women's health as I became a woman who all of a sudden felt this pressure to understand more than just anatomy, physiology, genetics, but actually wondering about my own biology and thinking, how is it that I can feel so equipped with knowledge about research and science and yet so ill-equipped to help people? And I think that, and even understand my own body. I still felt like, how is it that modern medicine and research hasn't provided us tools to actually self-interrogate, to understand whether pain is normal, to understand whether our hormones are okay. And I think that's really what led me to create Hertility, to enable us to actually just create something that was like a calculator that said, you as an individual have these menstrual factors, have these pain points, have these lifestyle factors. What are your risks of any one of the multiple conditions that affect women in such high prevalence? And so that's why we've built this, essentially a diagnostic screening tool for now 21 different conditions, and to do so in such an accessible way. I feel quite proud to be able to now give people help when they ask me rather than give them scary statistics.
Well, you have done some research as well that I just want to draw on, and you found that 47% of the fertility community said that heavy periods impacted their choice of workout outfit because they were afraid of leakages or discomfort. So how does what you wear to work out then, do you think, impact on, your choice of exercise, and what else were you being told?
What we saw was that actually the sheer prevalence of really heavy bleeding actually impacts not just a choice of workout, but whether you go at all. And actually even start, we know still now that young girls do not start sports out of fear of leaking, out of any of these different barriers. And we know that there are enough barriers to entry already, but the fact that we experience on such high levels irregularities, so it's unpredictable when your period will come, and then also heavy menstrual bleeding, that you feel this sense of almost immotility, like you cannot move for fear you leak or for fear that you are not in control. And I think that it isn't just for younger girls. We see this throughout every single age range, and this is 450,000 women, and yet we don't speak more loudly about irregular cycles, heavy, painful periods, and the impact that that has on our day-to-day lives. And I think hopefully we'll be able to just equip ourselves with the fact that you're not on your own and there's no shame and stigma attached to it, but that actually we should rally together and support each other. And I think having lines like this that enable movement for protection, to say, actually, I've got this, I think maybe I've got this extra, and it's not visible. It's actually, we tried on this range and we thought, this is amazing that this technology that supports this without, I think many of us will have had these clunky pads, or without that wodge of tissue that you had to run to the bathroom for. It's an amazing, amazing range that supports movement.
Yeah, I think so. Michelle, as an athlete, you have to wear some pretty skimpy outfits out there, don't you? And you're jumping into the sand as well, which, the combination.
I'm glad those days are done.
But just, thinking back to it, my first period came 2 days before the British Championships in a leotard with a brick between my legs, basically.
What did you have on them big, thick pads?
Yes, because my mum said, no, don't use a Tampax straight away. I'm not sure if it was an old wives' tale or if it's true or if you shouldn't, but, don't use Tampax, use pads. And, the thought of kind of I'm kind of like cringing now with embarrassment of like sticking my leg in the air and thinking, is it going to pop out? Is it going to, the weird thing was I did really well. Then I decided that periods were a good thing for gymnastics.
That's a good thing.
Because I was so superstitious. I was like, oh, damn, I'm not on my period. But how much was the kind of the actual, the manifestation of your period, if you like, and when it came as a competition time, thinking about that, leakages, were you actually able to fully focus on the job in hand?
I used to go on the pills to prevent my periods from coming when I was competing because of that fear.
That's not unusual,
of bleeding through. And I, got 2 daughters now, 20 and 17, who are very sporty as well. And, my middle daughter, and she won't be embarrassed me saying it, she's got very heavy periods. She's like, Mommy, I hope my cycle, I don't want to be bleeding. I'm a heptathlete and this comes through. So we've actually now started to look at how we can put her on the pill, because the last thing you want is for her to be, blood to be coming out, or even the fear of the fact of, I could come on or I'm bleeding heavily, that's quite embarrassing for anybody.
A lot of women's football teams and rugby teams have actually, pushed for non-white short.
That's right.
Fought for that, which is, it's just ridiculous when you think about it. There was even a thing for them to have to fight for. And I think we need to kind of move this towards perimenopause and exercise as well, don't we? But before we do that, I just want to, we talked a little bit about how you can lose motivation to exercise, but if you're in the right kit, if you feel confident in your sports gear, it can be such a positive thing in your menstrual cycle to exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being aware of, like Helen says, being aware of where you are in your menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle being from day 1 of your period all the way through to the day before your next period starts, being aware of the phases, being aware of what's going on hormonally, but also not letting it hold you back. I see a lot of discourse on TikTok at the moment saying you should only lift weights in your follicular phase. So when your testosterone is rising, your estrogen is rising as well. But that's doing us a bit of a disservice. We should really be listening to our bodies and honoring how we feel each day. So we're not meant to feel the same way every day. And I think we need to honor that, but also have that awareness of where we are in our menstrual cycle.
Because it can really boost your mood. It can really boost your physical energy as well, can't it? You know, the run or whatever it is that you've done afterwards, and you can feel so much better. The research that you've done as well, Helen, around perimenopause is very interesting.
Yes.
Hertility found that 76% of women became less active during the perimenopause. And when you think of all the health benefits that we've just been discussing there, why do you think it is that those women feel so disempowered to exercise?
I really think that it's an unfair point of life where I think a lot of things, you know, we're looking after children, we're looking after our parents, we're looking after, you know, we're at a tipping point in our careers. And I think that plays a role. But what we really found super interesting from the Hertility Reproductive Report was that so many women, as you said, you pointed out when the midpoint was, okay, it's when you're 39. But actually what we saw from our data was that a huge percentage of women identified as being perimenopausal at much younger ages. And when we looked at the symptoms associated with it, it was all mental health. And so often when it comes to menstrual health, we separate it from mental health. And we saw from this data that the two are inextricably linked, that actually the most predominant factors that influence perimenopause or even somebody's identification of feeling they are in perimenopause were changes to do with their mental health. So usually anxiety, depression, low mood, irritability, all of those factors that make you feel different and yet may not be recognized clinically. And that to me is a huge driving force. When your mental health isn't fully there, that's the first thing that will drive you to lose motivation to move.
And also, I think, Michelle, you kind of acknowledged it a little bit earlier on, when you're in perimenopause and you're not putting on muscling quite the same way because of the drop off of hormones, then you think the training's like, well, what's the point anymore? You know, I used to do this. I used to do these glute bridges and it had an immediate effect on my bum. And now I don't, it's what's happening. So you kind of then start thinking, well, I might as well not bother anymore until you understand what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's what you know, a lot of my clients were saying. Even one of my best friends is sitting in the audience today. She was training like she's training for the Olympics, and she was still putting on all the pounds. So you lose a lot of motivation then, and not knowing that the lack of estrogen is why, you know, the body receptors and everything else. So I think it's about educating. And for everybody out there, 38 and onwards, 38 and under, you need to educate yourself so that when this does happen to you, you can draw on your resource and say, okay, it's down to that. I've got low mood or I don't fancy doing that. But be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And being kind to yourself also means educating yourself as well. You know, fill up your toolbox. I always say your traveling toolbox. Fill it up so that you can go in there and say, okay, that might be that. And talk. There's enough females in here already, you know. Share experiences because they're powerful, you know.
Yeah, and enjoyment, which we talked about earlier on with exercise, I think as well is so important. And it might be that you shift what you've always done.
Always switch it up.
You might have done something, you know, it might have been a runner. It might be time now to not run
Switch
anymore.
it up.
And do you advise that with your clients if you see them kind of
absolutely. My clients, I see them saying, right, what could you do different? I always ask them the question, what could you do different to what you did before? What brings you joy? And, you know, sometimes that's a really hard question. I don't really know what brings me joy because they're feeling low mood. They're not feeling themselves. What brings you joy? What would you like to do? Do you know what? I just want to go and walk my dog. Well, go and walk your dog. Just walk your dog with a little bit more intensity, maybe do a couple more hills, change your route. Whatever it might be, we have to simplify it. Because not everybody, and I'm very aware of it, not everybody wants to go in the gym 3-4 times a week, lift weights, wants to do high rocks, wants to do, you know, CrossFit. Not everybody wants to do all of that, you know, and it's true. And why should they?
No,
Not today. Not today.
not today, Helen. Definitely not today. But it might be that because what the thing that comes back time and time again from fitness experts who come on the midpoint is that actually we need to keep the intensity energy up because obviously you think, I'm getting older, I'll slow down on those things.
No.
You've got to keep it up.
No, you've got to
Because you
invest.
said before, use it or lose it. And so sometimes goal setting is a good thing with regard to
Powerful.
exercise, isn't it? And you kind of get your mojo back by, I don't know, doing a big long cycle challenge, or you sign up for a half marathon, or you do something with a friend, I think, as well. So you're accountable.
Absolutely.
And you have that person that's kind of got your back. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and again, you know, when you're coaching somebody, life coaching somebody, Gabby, don't steal my job. You've already got your hands full already. But you're absolutely right. Goal setting, making small little goals ahead of you, not too far ahead. Check in with yourself again. Have that accountability friend, and at the end of the day, you've got to look after yourself. So, you know, put in those little yoga classes with Lenice.
It's also about what serves your body at a different time of your life, recognizing that your body has changed and that your hormones are different, and that the things that used to serve you may not serve you in the same way. And I think that for us, we've love to educate around understanding your baseline. So it's so different for one person. And I think that's what's really can be misleading about reference ranges for certain hormones, right? For one person at their peak, theirs might be actually quite high. And so anything that deviates from that when they get older, actually they don't feel well. And yet they'll be told, you know, everything's within range. And I think that's why we really try to educate, to understand when you feel your best, what's your baseline when you feel your best? Because then when you feel terrible, you may still be within a reference range, but you understand that actually this is not good for me. And actually that's what even when they say don't test during perimenopause, I'm like, test when you're younger and understand where your true north is when it comes to feeling your best. Understand then when anything deviates from that actually you need to work on that. And that's what's different for you.
That we've had on the podcast who are kind of midlife women's health doctors, if you like, the likes of Dr. Louise Newsom and Dr. Sarah Matthews, talk about the fact that everybody's hormones are different every day, obviously. So a blood test will give you a certain amount of information, but actually it's only through that regular kind of monitoring of yourself that you will have
track your ovaries over your calories.
Hey,
That's what we say.
we like that one.
Yeah. A bit jealous I didn't come up with that one. Obviously, nutrition, again, plays a part in the perimenopause. The advice you gave before regarding the menstrual cycle, those kind of are the pillars, really, that take you right through.
Yeah, absolutely. Having those foundations and knowing that if you're kind of doing this tick list in your mind of protein, fat, fiber, greens, that will do a job not only in your menstrual years, but in your perimenopausal years, where actually we have these huge fluctuations in estrogen and that affects our blood sugar balance. So we need to have more fat, we need to have more protein. And actually thinking about estrogen, and everyone talks about perimenopause and just this decline in estrogen, but it's fluctuating so much. And phytoestrogens are really, really interesting foods to add in during perimenopause. So your flaxseed, you know, if you're eating a bowl of porridge in the morning, throwing on 2 tablespoons of flax seeds can be really nice. Throwing that in your smoothie, great way to get phytoestrogens to kind of support that estrogen balance that can be such an issue during perimenopause.
Excellent. Any other foods that you would give out as tips?
So
people love a little list.
Yeah, for sure. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention gut health. I know it's the topic at the moment. Our gut does change a lot during perimenopause and postmenopause. And so doing what you can to add in that diversity. So I mentioned fiber, the different kinds of fiber. So the nuts, the seeds, the fruits, the vegetables. And people talk a lot about fermented foods, and those are super important, but you need to tend to the bacteria that are already there. So that's what fiber does. That's what fats, so your oily fish, your omega-3s, that also helps. So, you know, that's like kind of tick list: the fats, the fiber, the phytoestrogens, the protein.
And the variety.
Yeah.
And the colour as well.
Rainbow colour, isn't it?
Rainbow
That's what I
colour,
used to say,
Just
yeah.
think about that. It's so important, isn't it? I think I would say the biggest change for me in terms of how I think about food now, say to my 30-year-old self, is is this nourishing me?
Yeah.
And is this giving me, the thing, all those things that you say, not can I get Giselle's thighs, you know what I mean? Which is kind of like the hours wasted.
I know. You look
looking
back
at-
and you
She's
think,
all
what
out
a
of
waste.
omegas. Now I got loads.
And does this make me feel better? Is this going to give me more energy and give me, what I need to be healthy and strong and happy? And I think that's kind of the direction that we're all hoping that all the kinds of research that you've been doing, Helen, and that we're encouraging science to give us that information, aren't we? Because for so long, it feels like it's an area, women's health has been an area that's been neglected in science.
Completely underserved. And I think that's what was so disappointing when we started Hertility. We wanted to build out a predictive capability to say, not just a generalized statistic, but what are your risks as an individual? What are your risks as an individual at different time points in your life, whatever your background, whatever your symptoms. But when we looked at what we have used historically, not historically, what we have used to determine clinical references for women has been based on such poor data sets. And I think the most shocking example, so we would be disappointed when we would see that a study was carried out on 30 women and that was used to inform a clinical guideline. But I think the most shocking and disappointing one I saw was that the largest study that was used to develop estrogen for hormone replacement therapy was actually carried out on 4,000 people. Not one of them was a woman.
Wow.
Can you imagine the insanity of that?
Wow.
I can't, speechless.
Speechless. And so when they released this drug, women literally dropped dead because the dosage was so wrong. And it makes me infuriated, actually, to think how poorly we can conduct science and completely ignore 52% of the planet.
Yeah. Wow. That is shocking. And I guess, we have moved on from that.
This is the revolution. This is our revolution.
Of good stuff is coming down the track. But in it to fill the gaps in, and I think as women naturally do, we talk to each other. And that is so important, isn't it, Michelle? And that supportiveness you get, but also exchanging ideas and information. And what is your normal might not be mine, but it might help inform me, and then I can tell somebody else. Community.
Yeah, absolutely. And get your tribe around you, and it's really important, especially for midlife, to find your women that support you, that leverage you, that want to see you do well. And that in itself, that supports your mental health as well. And I think this whole journey of perimenopause and menopause, you'll find you'll know who's got your corner. Put it that way. You'll know who's got your corner. And there's a lot of room for everybody out there, ladies, by the way. There's a lot of room for everybody. There's a lot of doctors out there. Reach out, get your contacts out there. And actually, you know what? It's your job to explore your options, explore your options.
And those communities, especially in exercise and nutrition as well, they're really important. I think that with something like the yoga community, there's different areas, isn't there, that specialise in different things. But are you seeing a growth and a burgeoning for women's health-related yoga?
I think it's more about women being able to see the capability of their body at different stages of life, and knowing that as you move throughout the different stages, you don't just have to let everything go. My mother-in-law, she's in her 60s, and she talks about how she's just, 1 foot closer to the grave. And I find it so depressing.
In her 60s?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so depressing. And, this kind of old school thinking of, I just kind of fall apart as I get older. And I'm so thankful that is changing. And yoga is a really important way to build strength, to feel powerful, to also connect with your nervous system. Because, in perimenopause, we do see that our nervous system does get quite taxed. So that simple yogic breath of taking a long, full inhale in through your nose, and then releasing that out through your nose, and then just doing that as many times as you need, is just so powerful. It's a superpower.
We could do more, but I'm not sure it's going to be the greatest listen for my listener on her dog walk today. And the world, it's fast evolving this area, because it feels to me, like it's an area that I'm fascinated by, that suddenly kind of, because science has woken up to the fact that 51% of the population has been ignored for a while. They've realised there's gold in their hills, and they realise that as we've got women working in the workplace and doing so, we might as well look after them then and keep them in the workplace, because one of the shocking statistics, about women in the midlife is how many drop out of their careers they've worked so hard for. They've earned the right to be there in their prime. They've done those 10,000 hours, and they've and then they disappear because of the symptoms that are taking over their lives. So this feels to me like an area that you're only going to kind of find more and more that's going to help women retain that power and use those strengths.
That was one of our big initiatives, was making employers be responsible for their female employees. One that we called being a reproductively responsible organization, where you say, we're not just going to sideline you, put you out. And actually it was so important for us to actually provide education. So when you provide a benefit to an organization, it's redundant unless you are actually providing the education and tools and resources. And I think that's been so satisfying for me. I am a lecturer, so being able to continue lecturing, but in a workplace organization, to educate, and actually feeling like this is not just educating women who need to hear it. And the men in the room were so grateful. I remember hearing a very senior partner stand up, and he said, I have 2 teenage daughters and a clearly perimenopausal wife. And after this educational session, I feel like this is information I should have known a very long time ago. And I feel like my life makes a lot more sense. And being able to be a supportive partner, but understand that actually, there's so much blame and fury, and actually the statistics around perimenopause are quite sad. You're most likely to get a divorce during perimenopause, but unfortunately, you're also it's the most frequent time that women commit suicide is during perimenopause, and how we can so easily mitigate that by just providing education where you would ordinarily not meet people, which is where they work.
Yeah, it's such important work. And I think everything that we've talked about and all the changes, we know the constant that we need to keep moving. We need to keep moving forwards, both metaphorically and physically, and to be able to do that in a way that we feel confident. And so hopefully everything we've discussed today will help those listening to keep doing that. So can you just please give it up for my wonderful panel of Lenise, Helen and Michelle. Thank you.